The stars beyond the observation deck shimmered like scattered diamonds, but the beauty of the cosmos was lost on most of the officers aboard the flagship. The Interstellar Royal Fleet's command center was tense, buzzing with whispered conversations and the soft hum of machinery. Captain Elias Varn leaned against the railing, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the distant expanse. He had seen this beauty before, in a calmer sector of space, but this moment was different. Somewhere within the uncharted nebula of shadows, the royal vessel Aurora's Grace was trapped and time was running out. The alert sounded, sharp and urgent. The officers straightened and the room fell silent. The message came through crackling and fragmented. This is the Aurora's Grace, systems failing. Trapped in nebula. Request immediate assistance. Crew and royal passengers in danger. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a stunned silence behind. The council chamber erupted into discussion. Alien commanders from various allied races argued over the risks. The nebula has claimed entire fleets, one of them said, his scales glinting under the room's light. No ship has ever returned from its heart. To send a rescue now is madness. A soft hum of frustration came from the human side of the council. Elias watched quietly. The aliens, with their perfect logic and calculated caution, seemed frozen by the impossibility of the task. They underestimated humans' ability to adapt, to think beyond the predictable patterns that governed their own species. He had faced impossible situations before, and more often than not, human ingenuity had carried the day. "I will go," Elias said, stepping forward. His voice cut through the arguments like a blade. All eyes turned toward him. "I will bring the Aurora's Grace out of that nebula. No one else is going to risk themselves, so I will." There was a pause, filled only by the soft hum of the ship's engines. Alien counselors exchanged glances, skeptical and disapproving. "You?" asked one, a tall being with iridescent skin. "A single human pilot? You would be destroyed before reaching the vessel." Elias met the gaze steadily. "Perhaps," he said calmly. "But humans survive because we are not limited by the same rules as you. We take risks, improvise, and act when others hesitate. I am not saying I will succeed, but I will try. And the lives aboard that ship are worth the risk." The council debated briefly, their voices a mix of fear and doubt, but ultimately they relented. Elias was given clearance. A prototype vessel had been prepared, a sleek and agile craft capable of maneuvering in unpredictable conditions. Its experimental engines could harness energy currents. Its shields could absorb bursts of plasma that would obliterate normal hulls. But even the ship's designers admitted that no one had tested it in the heart of a nebula as volatile as this one. Elias walked to the docking bay, each step measured and confident. Engineers and mechanics moved around him, performing last-minute checks on his vessel, the Stormhawk. The ship gleamed under the lights, its surface smooth, designed for speed and survival rather than comfort. Elias ran a hand along the hull, feeling the hum of power within. He knew every panel, every wire, every system. It was an extension of himself, and he trusted it completely. Before launch, he paused and looked back at the fleet. The assembled ships, larger and more powerful, would not follow him into the nebula. The council had ordered them to maintain a safe distance. Human eyes could see what others could not. Instinct could guide him where calculations might fail. It was a dangerous thought, but one he embraced. The launch sequence began. The docking bay doors opened, revealing the swirling colors of the nebula beyond. Green and violet plasma currents twisted and collided, creating shadows that seemed alive, shifting unpredictably. Elias's fingers danced over the controls as the engines roared to life. He took a deep breath and released it slowly. The journey had begun. As he entered the outer edge of the nebula, sensors immediately began to scream warnings. Energy spikes, gravitational distortions, and volatile plasma storms made navigation almost impossible. The nebula was more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Other pilots might have panicked, but Elias thrived in moments like this. He adjusted the shields, relying partly on the ship's AI and partly on his own intuition. Humans were different. They could feel the flow of danger, anticipated in ways machines could not. Hours passed as he navigated deeper. Each turn of the ship required precision and courage. Plasma arcs danced across the viewport, and debris fields loomed like predators ready to strike. He remembered the simulations, the countless hours of preparation, and yet nothing could truly prepare him for this reality. The nebula was alive in a way, responding unpredictably to his presence as if testing him. During a brief moment of calm, he accessed the ship's data logs. The Aurora's grace had sent fragments of its position, giving him a rough trajectory. The ship's hull was holding, but the stress of the nebula would not allow it to stay intact for long. Elias clenched his jaw. Every second counted. Every maneuver mattered. One miscalculation could mean the loss of the royal vessel, the crew, and countless lives. He encountered his first major obstacle, a massive plasma storm, its currents twisting in chaotic spirals. Sensors failed to predict its movements accurately. Elias gritted his teeth and relied on instinct. He adjusted the engines, guiding the Stormhawk through gaps that seemed impossibly small, twisting and diving with a grace only a human pilot could muster. Behind him, the storm crashed with explosive force, but he emerged unscathed. A small smile crossed his face. He had made it. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. The heart of the nebula awaited. A place where gravitational anomalies and electromagnetic surges would challenge even the bravest of pilots. The Aurora's grace was somewhere within, and time was slipping away. He set his course, focusing entirely on the mission. Fear was a luxury he could not afford, and he relied on the human traits that had carried him through impossible odds. Courage, creativity, and the stubborn refusal to surrender. Through the communications channel, he tried to reach the royal vessel, but static swallowed his words. The nebula blocked all signals. He had to navigate by instinct, by reading the subtle changes in the environment, the way the plasma currents moved and shifted. He thought of the human's history, of explorers who ventured into the unknown and faced dangers that seemed insurmountable. That legacy was his guide now, pushing him forward even when every rational thought screamed for retreat. The journey through the nebula was a test of endurance as much as skill. Elias faced rogue asteroids, sudden bursts of radiation and sudden drops in gravity that threatened to crush the ship. Every second was a choice: act decisively or risk annihilation. Yet each choice reaffirmed why humans were feared and admired by alien allies. Where others hesitated, humans acted. Where others relied solely on logic, humans innovated. Where others might give up, humans pressed forward. At one point, the Stormhawk was caught in a gravitational eddy, spinning violently. Elias's hands flew over the controls, adjusting shields, engines, and thrusters in perfect harmony. Sweat ran down his forehead, but he did not falter. With a daring burst of speed and a calculated roll, he escaped the eddy, leaving it spinning harmlessly behind him. For a moment, he allowed himself a glance at the viewport. The nebula stretched endlessly, a living, chaotic sea, yet he moved through it like a swimmer cutting through water. Hours turned into what felt like days, yet Elias remained focused. The Aurora's grace could be anywhere, hidden within the shadows and storms. He relied on fragments of transmissions, readings of energy patterns, and his intuition to guide him. He thought of the royal passengers, the diplomats, and the crew relying on him. Failure was not an option. Every human instinct screamed to keep going, to push further, to confront danger rather than hide from it. Then, finally, through a narrow corridor of shimmering plasma, a massive shape appeared. The Aurora's grace, battered and barely holding together, floated like a wounded giant. Its lights flickered weakly and small fires burned along its hull. Elias's heart quickened, but he did not panic. This was the moment he had prepared for, the moment where human courage and skill would be tested against the impossible. He adjusted the Stormhawk's trajectory, aligning with the royal vessel, readying the rescue. His voice came alive over the intercom, calm but firm. "Hold on, I'm coming. We'll get you out of here." The response was weak, fragmented, but he could hear the hope in it. The crew knew somehow that humans were different, that human courage could defy what seemed impossible. The nebula was not done testing him. Plasma arcs surged around the Aurora's grace, threatening to tear it apart before he could attach rescue lines. Elias's fingers moved with precision, weaving the ship through the deadly currents. One wrong move could destroy both vessels. Yet the thought of giving up never crossed his mind. Humans did not yield. Humans did not surrender. Humans fought even when the odds were impossible. The first connection was made. The rescue lines latched onto the Aurora's grace. Elias steadied the Stormhawk, feeling the strain as the larger ship began to respond. He could see the relief on the crew's faces, the faint hope shining through the fear. This was what humans excelled at. Daring when others would hesitate, risking everything for the sake of others. and believing that survival was possible even in the heart of chaos. As the Stormhawk, the heart of the nebula of shadows was more treacherous than Elias had imagined. Waves of green and violet plasma twisted unpredictably, and the gravitational distortions shifted like tides on an alien sea. The Stormhawk's shields flared repeatedly as arcs of energy brushed past the hull. Each surge sent shudders through the cockpit, forcing Elias to adjust continuously. Yet he remained calm, his eyes scanning the swirling chaos, calculating angles and speeds with a mix of instinct and experience. The Aurora's Grace floated ahead, wounded and unresponsive. Its massive hull was scarred by collisions with invisible plasma tendrils, and small fires flickered along the surface. Every movement required precision. If he miscalculated, both ships could be destroyed. But Elias had faced impossible odds before, and he trusted himself to navigate through the nebula's deadly embrace. He began with a careful assessment of the currents. Sensors were partially blocked by electromagnetic interference, and the AI warnings were inconsistent, but Elias could sense the subtle shifts in the plasma streams. He maneuvered the Stormhawk through narrow corridors of energy, brushing past arcs that could have disintegrated a standard vessel in seconds. His hands flew over the controls, steady and sure. As he approached the royal vessel, a new threat emerged. A series of rogue asteroids, likely torn from some distant planet, began tumbling through the nebula, drawn into its chaotic currents. They spun unpredictably, some the size of small moons, others smaller but still deadly. Sensors could track some, but others appeared suddenly, materializing from the nebula's shifting shadows. Elias adjusted the engines, weaving the ship through the debris with movements that were almost a dance. He felt the rhythm of the nebula, an unspoken pulse, and moved with it. Inside the Aurora's Grace, panic was beginning to rise. Crew members struggled to stabilize systems, while the royal passengers clutched at chairs and rails. The ship groaned as the gravitational distortions tugged at it. Then came the first communications. Weak, static-filled voices crackled through the channel, carrying fear, hope, and relief all at once. "Captain, is that really you?" one crew member asked, voice trembling. "Yes," Elias replied, steady and confident. "Hold tight. I'll get you out of here. Just stay calm and follow my instructions." He could feel their relief, a tangible force that strengthened his resolve. Humans, he knew, thrived on courage in the face of fear. It was not the absence of fear, but the will to act despite it. And now their survival depended on him. The first attempt to attach rescue lines almost failed. Plasma arcs struck the Stormhawk, shaking the ship violently. Elias gritted his teeth, adjusting the shields and thrusters with precise timing. With a surge of calculated energy, he maneuvered closer, guiding the lines toward the Aurora's Grace. Sparks flew as the connection hooked onto the vessel's hull. A small cheer echoed in his ears, muffled by the comm interference. He allowed himself a brief nod of satisfaction. One step completed, but the nebula was far from done. The plasma currents began to intensify, swirling faster, striking both ships with sudden bursts of energy. The gravitational distortions twisted unpredictably, forcing the Aurora's Grace into dangerous rotations. Elias had to anticipate every movement, adjusting the Stormhawk's engines in perfect coordination with the larger vessel. Every second was a test of skill, endurance, and nerve. He remembered lessons from human history, explorers who had faced the unknown, soldiers who had defied overwhelming odds, inventors who had risked everything for a single breakthrough. That was what he embodied now. He relied not only on technology but on intuition, creativity, and courage, human qualities that could bend the impossible into the achievable. Hours passed in tense silence. The nebula's energy threatened to overwhelm them at every turn, but Elias pressed forward. He learned to read its subtle cues. The flicker of light across the plasma currents, the slight tug on the hull, the hum of energy as if the nebula were alive, aware of his presence. He adjusted speed and direction in fractions of seconds, dodging what seemed inevitable. At one point, a massive plasma surge erupted directly in their path. It crackled with white-hot intensity, splitting the space around them with destructive force. Sensors predicted certain destruction, but Elias refused to retreat. He focused on the currents, guiding the Stormhawk sideways, angling the shields at just the right degree. The surge passed, leaving both vessels intact. Sweat dripped from his brow, but his determination remained unshaken. The crew of the royal vessel began to trust him more with each maneuver. They followed his instructions, shutting down non-essential systems, reinforcing weak points, and preparing for sudden jolts. Their fear gradually transformed into cautious hope. Some whispered prayers while others muttered gratitude, and somewhere deep inside, Elias felt a surge of human pride, not arrogance, but the quiet confidence that humans could achieve what others thought impossible. As they moved deeper into the nebula, new dangers emerged. Electromagnetic storms flickered unpredictably, disabling instruments and lights. Gravity wells pulled the vessels into spinning orbits. Debris from unknown origins tumbled around them like deadly hail. Yet Elias continued, weaving the Stormhawk through impossible gaps, guiding the Aurora's grace along paths no one else could calculate. He found brief moments of reflection in the chaos. He thought of his training, the countless simulations and exercises he had undergone, each one preparing him for this impossible moment. He thought of humanity's history, of courage in the face of extinction, of the will to explore the stars despite the dangers, and he thought of the people aboard the royal vessel, their lives now in his hands. Every human trait he had cultivated, the creativity, the intuition, the stubborn courage, was being tested. A sudden alert jolted him from thought. A rogue asteroid, larger than anything the sensors had predicted, barreled toward the vessels. Time slowed as Elias calculated trajectories, adjusting engines and shields in a flurry of precise movements. The asteroid tore past, missing by mere meters. He exhaled slowly, his mind sharp, aware that luck alone could not sustain them. Skill, intuition, and courage had saved them this time. Then came the most dangerous challenge yet. The nebula's central energy rift lay ahead, a massive, twisting vortex of gravitational and plasma forces. Any ship entering it would likely be torn apart. Yet to rescue the Aurora's grace, Elias had no choice. He studied the currents, looking for a narrow path through the chaos. There was only one possible route, a gap so small that any miscalculation would mean certain destruction. Elias's hands moved over the controls with fluid precision, adjusting the engines, shields, and thrusters in perfect harmony. The Stormhawk shuddered under the pressure, but he pressed forward, guiding the vessel like a sculptor shaping raw energy. The royal vessel followed, tethered to his ship, moving as one under his command. The nebula seemed to resist, sending plasma surges and gravitational shocks in an almost deliberate attempt to destroy them. Yet Elias did not waver. He relied on every ounce of human ingenuity, every instinct honed by experience, every lesson from history and survival. Humans, he knew, thrived in situations where others froze. They adapted. They improvised. They overcame. The first section of the rift passed. Both ships emerged briefly into a calmer corridor, allowing the crew to catch their breath. Elias scanned the area, preparing for the next stage. He noticed small tears in the royal vessel's hull, damage that could become critical if they faced another surge. He made mental notes, calculating repairs and adjustments as they moved. The crew worked under his guidance, reinforcing weak points, following every instruction without hesitation. Even in the eye of this brief calm, Elias remained alert. The nebula had tested him continuously, and he knew it would continue, but the human spirit was unyielding. He thought of the courage it took to act in the face of fear, the determination to protect others, the willingness to risk everything for the lives of those who could not defend themselves. These were traits no technology or alien logic could replace. As the vessels approached the next segment of the nebula, plasma currents intensified, swirling around them like living snakes. The gravitational forces twisted unpredictably. Elias's heart raced, but he felt alive in a way only humans could. Danger was not a deterrent. It was a challenge, a test of skill, courage, and determination. He guided the Stormhawk forward, weaving through the deadly currents, calculating each movement with precision. The royal vessel followed, tethered but responsive, moving as one with his ship. The crew shouted encouragement, their fear mingling with hope. For the first time, they began to believe that survival was possible. Elias felt a surge of determination. The hardest part of the journey lay ahead, but he would not falter. Humans thrived on challenge, on the unknown, on impossible odds. He had faced death before and emerged stronger. And now, with the royal vessel tethered to him and the lives of its passengers in his hands, he pressed forward into the heart of the nebula, ready to face whatever came next. Every movement mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. And yet Elias Varn, the human pilot, continued with unwavering focus, guided by instinct, courage, and the unshakable belief that humans could defy the impossible. The heart of the nebula of shadows churned violently around them, but Elias Varn had become one with the chaos. The Stormhawk moved as if it had a mind of its own, responding instantly to his commands. The royal vessel, tethered securely, followed every maneuver, swaying dangerously but obediently. The plasma storms raged around them, striking without warning, but Elias kept his focus, his hands steady on the controls. "This is it," he muttered under his breath, eyes scanning the twisting currents ahead. The central energy rift loomed, a massive vortex of light and shadow that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. Any misstep now could destroy both ships instantly. Yet Elias did not hesitate. He had prepared for this. He had anticipated it, and most importantly, he believed in the human ability to survive where others would fail. Inside the royal vessel, the crew and passengers clung to rails and chairs, bracing for the worst. Yet despite their fear, a sense of hope had begun to blossom. They trusted Elias now, not because of his reputation, but because of his actions. He had guided them through dangers no one else dared face. They could feel it in his calm determination, the unspoken courage that radiated from him like a beacon. Elias adjusted the engines, angling the Stormhawk toward the narrowest passage of the rift. The plasma currents surged violently, and the gravitational forces twisted unpredictably, threatening to pull both ships apart. He took a deep breath, relying on every instinct, every skill honed over years of training and experience. Humans, he reminded himself, thrived on challenges. They adapted, improvised, and fought even when survival seemed impossible. The first surge of the rift hit. Plasma arcs struck the Stormhawk, shaking it violently. Elias gritted his teeth, pressing forward. The shields flared brightly, absorbing the energy, while the engines hummed with maximum output. The royal vessel shuddered but held, tethered securely. Elias's eyes flicked to the sensors, then back to the viewport. He guided them through, weaving with precision and timing, every movement calculated yet instinctive. Time seemed to stretch. The nebula tested them relentlessly, sending obstacles that no sensor could predict. Debris tumbled through the currents like deadly missiles. Energy surges struck without warning. The Aurora's grace groaned under the pressure, but Elias continued. He spoke to the crew through the comms, calm and clear, giving instructions that reassured them and kept them focused. "Adjust main stabilizers to 42%, he instructed. "Divert auxiliary power to aft shields. Brace for turbulence." The crew obeyed, trusting his guidance completely. Humans were remarkable, he thought. Not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they believed in each other, in courage, and in the impossible. A sudden plasma surge struck the tether line connecting the two vessels, snapping it with a violent jerk. Elias's stomach tightened, but he did not falter. He recalculated instantly, launching a secondary line from the Stormhawk to the royal vessel. The AI assisted, but the maneuver required human intuition, an understanding of movement, energy, and risk that no machine could fully replicate. The line latched successfully and both ships stabilized. Elias exhaled slowly, but there was no time to relax. Ahead, the rift narrowed further. The currents twisted like serpents, converging at impossible angles. Sensors warned of imminent destruction, but Elias ignored the alarms. He relied on instinct, predicting the movement of the plasma and debris with a precision that defied logic. Every adjustment of the engines, every flick of the shields was a calculated act of courage and skill. The royal passengers whispered prayers, their fear still present but tempered by trust. Crew members worked with tense precision, reinforcing weak points and monitoring systems. Elias guided them like a conductor leading an orchestra, each move synchronized, every motion purposeful. Then came the final challenge, a massive surge of energy, brighter and hotter than anything they had faced, surged through the rift. It struck the Stormhawk head-on, shaking the vessel violently. Elias's hands flew over the controls, adjusting shields, engines, and thrusters with perfect timing. Sparks flew across the viewport as the surge passed, leaving the ships intact but dangerously close to their limits. "Almost there," he muttered. His voice was calm, but inside adrenaline coursed like wildfire. The human capacity to endure, to act under pressure, was being tested to its fullest. Every choice mattered. Every movement could mean life or death, yet he pressed forward. The rift began to widen, the current slowing slightly, offering the first glimpse of safety beyond the nebula. Elias guided the vessels toward the edge, each movement cautious but confident. The crew followed his instructions, their fear giving way to hope. The royal passengers watched him with awe, recognizing in this human pilot a courage that surpassed machines and logic. A sudden warning flashed. One of the Aurora's Grace's engines was failing. Without it, the ship could be pulled back into the nebula. Elias assessed the situation instantly. Retreat was not an option. He redirected power from the Stormhawk's engines, using his ship to stabilize the royal vessel. The maneuver was risky, pushing both vessels to their limits, but it worked. The failing engine held, and they continued toward the nebula's edge. Hours of tension passed in what felt like minutes. The swirling plasma began to thin, the gravitational anomalies lessened, and the debris fields grew sparser. Elias's focus never wavered, guiding them with steady hands, precise instincts, and unwavering courage. He had faced death countless times in simulations and missions, but this was the ultimate test. Finally, the ships emerged from the nebula into calm space. Stars stretched infinitely around them, unbroken and serene. The Aurora's Grace floated battered but intact, its crew and passengers safe. Elias allowed himself a small, exhausted smile. The impossible had been achieved. Inside the royal vessel, the crew erupted in cheers. Passengers stood, some with tears in their eyes, expressing gratitude to the human pilot who had risked everything to save them. Even alien observers watching remotely were stunned into silence. Logic had said it was impossible. Yet here was proof that humans could accomplish what others could not. Elias guided the Stormhawk to dock alongside the royal vessel. The rescue lines were released, systems stabilized, and the tension of the journey finally began to ebb. He leaned back in the cockpit, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of the ordeal lift slightly. The Royal Council, initially skeptical and fearful, arrived to meet him. Their faces, once etched with doubt, now reflected respect and admiration. "Captain Varn," one said, bowing slightly, "you have done what no one else could. You have saved the royal vessel and its passengers against impossible odds. Humans, you are remarkable." Elias nodded, acknowledging the praise but remaining humble. "I did what anyone would do for others' safety," he said simply. "Humans may take risks, yes, but we also persevere. Courage and determination are stronger than fear, stronger than obstacles." The council murmured among themselves, some alien leaders exchanging looks of quiet astonishment. For centuries, they had measured humans by logic, strength, and technology, often underestimating the human spirit. Elias had proven that courage, creativity, and adaptability could defy the odds in ways machines and strict calculations could not. The crew of the royal vessel worked quickly to repair damages, guided by Elias's instructions. Fires were extinguished, systems reactivated, and navigation recalibrated. Passengers moved carefully, still shaken but alive. Elias stayed by the viewport, watching the stars. He reflected on the journey, the chaos, the danger, and the moments where human intuition had made the difference between life and death. It was a reminder that no technology, no matter how advanced, could replace the human capacity to face the unknown and adapt. In the midst of a nebula that had swallowed fleets and claimed countless lives, humans had survived and prevailed. The thought filled him with quiet pride. As repairs continued, Elias finally allowed himself a moment of rest. The Stormhawk remained nearby, its systems intact, ready for whatever challenge might come next. The crew approached him, offering gratitude and admiration, their voices full of respect. Elias acknowledged them all, but his mind was already turning toward the next mission, the next unknown, the next challenge. Humans thrived on adversity, and he knew the stars held many more tests. For now, though, the danger had passed. The Aurora's Grace was safe, and the nebula, dark and chaotic, lay behind them. Elias's actions would be remembered not only for their skill, but for the courage that had defined them. Courage that no technology, no logic, no alien wisdom could replicate. In the calm that followed, the human pilot reflected on what had been accomplished. It was not just a rescue. It was a statement. Humans were fearless, inventive, and unyielding. They could face the impossible and emerge victorious. And in that moment, among the quiet stars and the fading glow of the nebula, Elias Varn knew that humanity's greatest strength was not in their ships, their weapons, or their technology, but in the courage and determination that lived within every human heart. As the royal vessel set course for safe space, Elias looked out into the stars and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The Nebula had tested him, challenged him, and almost claimed him, but he had endured. Humans had triumphed once again, proving that even in the face of overwhelming danger,